Hello and welcome to Seen Anything Good Lately. I'm Jason Solomons and this is the podcast bursting with cultural recommendations as the professionals from film, TV, books and music share their viewing passions and influences with me and with you. This week my guests could not be more different.
I saw that amazing Brazilian film, Bacurau, the other day. That is a real trip. I didn't know what to expect at all.
Just finished about a month ago, that Founder. Seriously well done. I mean, it's so watchable.
You heard author Jonathan Coe, the writer of The Rotters Club and Middle England, now with a new book out called Mr. Wilder and Me, about a young woman's experiences on the set of the late Billy Wilder film Fedora. And you also heard Craig Fairbrass, the towering South London actor who's appeared in Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone, EastEnders with Barbara Windsor, and plenty of gangster films, now looming as a threateningly friendly bodybuilding instructor in British film Muscle. A great read and a great watch that I can already recommend with my two guests, and they'll be recommending their own passions in just a moment, right after I tell you if I've seen anything good lately. I know I've been going on about it a bit, but Small Axe continues to amaze, and in Red, White and Blue, I think we get the best John Boyega performance of his career yet. It might be the defining one of his career, who knows? He's just great as Leroy Logan, a black man who wants to join the police force to do good from the inside, but meets the institutional racism head on. You know how much I love Mangrove and Lover's Rock already, but this third instalment feels like the most personal episode to Steve McQueen of the lot. The walls of white patrician portraits and the Queen, the institutional silence, the suspicion from his own black community, the doubts, the determination. I love the performance's physicality, the athleticism of it, and the sensitivity. I love his beige Gola sports bag, the friendship with imagination's Lee John, and the brilliant chase scene in a factory that's so sparse and so sober compared to a Hollywood one, say. Yet it's chilling in the way it's isolated and surrounded by these implacable machines. That's all very Steve McQueen. So yes, it might feel like half a film. You know, some of the characters are a little underdeveloped, and perhaps it's only scratched the surface of Leroy Logan's life story, and maybe there could have been a whole series on that alone. And if John Boyega wants to play that, well, I'm there, I'm watching all of that. But as part of the palette of colour that Small Axe as a series is bringing to British TV, Red, White and Blue is unmissable. And it's also got this track in. Imagination and So Good, So Right from their Body Talk album 1981, featuring Lee John on the falsetto vocals there. God, I love that record. My first guest this week is Jonathan Coe, without doubt one of my favourite writers, from his Thatcherite-era satire What a Carve-Up and the dark humour of The Rotters Club to the State of the Nation cringe comedy of Middle England. Coe can nail Englishness with precision and warmth. His books are characterised by sharp writing that gets right to the heart, an elegant approach to the drabness of the everyday. His latest book is a bit of a departure, but it's still delightful, a wistful reminiscence from a middle-aged film composer called Callista, who's thinking back to the heady days of her first job and how she ended up becoming an assistant to fabled Hollywood film director Billy Wilder. He of Sunset Boulevard, Some Like It Hot, Double Indemnity, The Apartment. I mean, basically, the list of his films is the pantheon itself. The book is about the making of one of his lesser-known later films, Fedora, from 1977, which I watched in preparation for reading this book. And I must say it was a very pleasant bit of homework to do. I set this to you on the last Seen Anything Good Lately, so I hope you've done your work. I did think that the film bore a thematic resemblance to Sunset Boulevard, starting with a corpse and narrated by the same actor, William Holden.
They'd done a good job on her, considering the messy way her life had ended. Well, at least she was going out in style. What with the spotlights and the fiddlers, and the honor guard with feathers in their helmets, and all those TV cameras, like it was some goddamn premiere. Sitting up there in the VIP section was that weird entourage of hers. The old Countess and her son, and Miss Balford, and Dr. Vando. Moist-eyed and grieving, those bastards. But they didn't fool me for a second. Poor Fedora. Maybe things would have turned out differently. Maybe she would still be alive if I hadn't gone to Corfu looking for her. Was it only 2 weeks ago?
Billy Wilder's Fedora, the opening of it there. I was intrigued to know what Jonathan Coe, who's always been a massive film fan, and that's always crept into his writing somehow. I wonder why he chose this movie to write about, and if he too was attracted by Billy Wilder deliberately going for that faded, end-of-an-era Sunset Boulevard grandeur.
He kind of courted that comparison, really. I mean, he did say a lot in interviews, this is my most serious film since Sunset Boulevard, and this revisits the themes of Sunset Boulevard and that kind of thing. And that was kind of asking for trouble in a way, because, you know, critics were always going to compare Fedora unfavorably to the earlier film. And of course, what it really lacks is a Gloria Swanson-sized performance from the female leads. We have Hildegard Neff and Martha Keller, both of whom do okay, but you know, he wanted, I think the original casting was Marlene Dietrich as the old movie star and Faye Dunaway as her daughter, and that would have been quite a film.
Yeah, let's make that one.
but Marlene Dietrich hated the script so much that you know, she sent him a very terse "no thanks, Billy," and not just "no thanks, Billy," but "why the hell do you want to do this story?" kind of thing. And in a way, you can see her point, because if there's one thing wrong with Fedora, it's the story, I think.
Yes, it does, and it sort of peters out. And poor old William Holden, who was great actually up to when he's in it, but the last half of the movie he just sort of spends in the background nodding away.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I mean, what? Yeah. So I mean, it begs the question: if people kept asking Billy Wilder why he was making this, why is he obsessed with this story in any way? Why are you obsessed with this movie, Jonathan, given that it's not a major Wilder act?
I'm not obsessed with it at all, but it's the moment in Billy Wilder's career that interests me most. There's this kind of transitional moment where he's fallen from grace a little bit. You have Scorsese, Coppola, Spielberg coming along with a different kind of style of filmmaking, which he admired very much, but knew he couldn't do himself. And, you know, the question I really wanted to ask in this book was how, as an artist, do you cope with that moment in your career, which comes to almost everybody, I think, particularly in the film business, you know, when suddenly you realize that you just don't have your finger on the pulse anymore and you've had a fantastic run, but, you know, do you call it a day or do you give it one last throw of the dice? And this, to me, is Wilder's swan song, really, and his kind of his last shot at greatness. And of course, it doesn't quite come off, and that's interesting in itself, because great artists' failures, in a way, tell you more about him than his successes do. I find one of the things about masterpieces is they don't really give you much room for analysis or commentary, because a masterpiece speaks for itself. Whereas as soon as you see Fedora, you want to start asking yourself, well, why on earth did he cast them, and why on earth did he choose this story, and what went wrong in that scene? And you know, there's a lot of material there, really.
It's interesting, isn't it, to come at comedy, or to come at your brand of comedy and observation through another art form. I mean, this is a book that really mirrors the structure, the world of film, to the point where there's a whole chapter of the book there's a screenplay. You morph through the mirror into another art form through literature. I mean, is that something you've just wanted to do? Do you know what I mean? I know your other books refer to music a lot, and you know, you're a big film fan, and you know, your books have been turned into plays and TV shows, but there was this one that sort of sees itself right in the film world, in the classic film world. I thought there was something interesting going on with form and desire there.
Paradoxically, I don't know how easy it would be to adapt it for film, actually. It might already have such a kind of intimate relationship with cinema that trying to turn it into a screenplay, you know, something there might get lost or go awry. I don't know. I mean, even the 50-page section, which is a film script, is not really a filmable film script. It's a film script to be read. But actually, that's just triggered a memory, which is that when I was in my late teens, I suppose, or early 20s, I was kind of obsessed with Pinter's Proust's screenplay. Do you remember that was published as a very handsome paperback volume? Joseph Losey was going to make a movie of Alain Recherche, Tempédieu, and Pinter wrote the screenplay.
That's right.
And of course, it never got off the ground. So this was a screenplay that was just there to be read as a book, really, and that's what I did. And it's a fantastic work of literature in its own right. I think that published screenplay. So maybe that was what was at the back of my mind when I did this section as a screenplay.
I've read quite a few screenplays. That one was a really good one. I really enjoyed it because it wasn't really a screenplay, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And there's also the fact that at the same kind of time in my life, really, I suppose, my late teens, it was too early for us to have a video recorder at home. So I used to record Billy Wilder films onto audio cassette off the television and listen to them. They fitted just about on a C120. Do you remember the old C120s? And I would listen to those in bed at night. That would be my equivalent of what would now be an audiobook, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so, again, the Wilder's, the dialogue, the music, the interrelationship between dialogue and music and sound. With some of Wilder's films, I know that much better than I know the visuals. And I think that kind of seeped into the writing of this novel as well.
This one, you get a sense, Jonathan, the number of people who want to talk to you about these things, that this one feels to me that everyone's like, oh, it's brilliant. We've got Jonathan Coe, we can get him on, but we can also talk about Billy Wilder. There's a sort of extra edge to this one in terms of the popularity and the anticipation around it.
I mean, it's wonderful for me because I would much rather talk about Billy Wilder in an interview than talk about myself or about my own books. It's much easier to talk about somebody else. It's not always easy to know how to pitch it because there are people who already know and love Billy Wilder, and of course they love that aspect of the book, they love the subject of the book and so on. There's also a lot of people who don't know anything about him, haven't seen his films, younger people in particular. I've seen plenty of online reviews which said, I was halfway through the book before it suddenly occurred to me that maybe this was a real person, so I had to look him up on Wikipedia and this kind of thing. Somehow I had to write it to cater for the Wilder buffs and for the complete Wilder novices, and that's where Callista came in, really, because I thought if I introduce the reader to him through the medium of someone who doesn't know anything about him at all and has never heard of him, for the people who already know Wilder, then that might be funny, there might be some comedy there, and for the people who don't know him, then that's a way of giving them the basic facts in the introduction and so on.
Jonathan, I really did enjoy it very much. I enjoyed watching Fedora and then reading the book, which I thoroughly recommend to everyone in that order. But if it's the other way around, then so be it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What have you been watching? Do you get to watch anything else yourself? Have you always been a big film watcher? You're like Callista, you get the BAFTA screeners. What have you been up to? What have you seen anything good lately?
Yeah, I've been watching a few BAFTA screeners. What did I see the other night? I saw The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss, which I really liked. Really good kind of white knuckle ride of a thriller, I thought. I mean, I love Elizabeth Moss in anything. She was also very good as Shirley Jackson in Shirley. Yeah. I saw that amazing Brazilian film Bacurau the other day.
Yeah, that's a trip.
That is a real trip. I didn't know what to expect at all. And and then like everybody else, I've been watching The Crown and The Queen's Gambit and.
Yeah, have you? Do you watch The Crown? I don't watch that. I mean, it's almost. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's another sort of hanging offence still, but I don't watch The Crown. I never have. I've always thought it looked like a silly idea.
I started watching the first season, the one set in the 1950s, and didn't stay with it, I have to say. But the current season I kind of find fascinating because I remember the era and the events themselves so well. And I'm also watching it with my daughter, who, of course, was born long after all this and doesn't really know the story of Charles and Diana. And it's quite fascinating watching just how kind of horrified and mesmerized she is by the unfolding tragedy and the kind of cruelty of it, really. I think this season is very good. I think it's really well done. I've always said that I feel a bit queasy about the way it mingles the real and the imagined, because I have a vivid memory of coming out of a screening of The Queen, my local cinema, a few years ago, whenever that was released, and overhearing a couple of people saying, "Oh, imagine Tony Blair talking to the Queen like that." I had no idea that happened, and I felt like saying to them, "Well, it's just a movie, it's a screenwriter's imagining of it." And I've always felt that was a slightly grey area, but I have to cede the moral high ground now because I've done exactly the same thing in Mr. Wilder and Me. So,
well, and you have real politicians in your books quite often, and Birmingham.
Well, I don't actually. I very rarely write about real politicians for precisely that reason. I mean, Boris Johnson wanders in and out of Middle England very, very briefly, but the main political spokesman in Middle England, the press guy for the David Cameron office is completely made up. And, people say, well, What a Carve-Up is a satire on Mrs. Thatcher. And Mrs. Thatcher is not in What a Carve-Up. She's not really even mentioned in it that often. So I've always kind of taken the opposite approach to the Peter Morgan approach, really. But with this novel, I've completely Peter Morganized it.
That's why it's going to be huge, and you'll be writing Netflix series now, because Peter did it very well with Nick Frost Nixon and the Queen. So no, I haven't watched, but I have been a bit of the Queen's Gambit, which I haven't finished yet, I must say, which says probably enough about it for me. I don't know how you've been feeling about not being in the cinema, Jonathan, and watching things at home. It's been a strange experience for me, I have to say. I'm finding it very unrewarding and untactile in a way, like I was talking about, the disappearing into that world. I find it much harder to do at home.
Well, I'm afraid to say I've been a bit of a home cinema watcher for the last 4 or 5 years, really, ever since we bought a projector and started, watching things at home in sort of cinema style conditions. I think it kind of kicked in when I went to some multiplex or other and suddenly realized that the screen I'd just paid £15 to watch a film on was smaller than the one I'd got at home, and thought, okay, there's something wrong here. So I'd pretty much got out of the cinema going habit before lockdown started. But, having been forced to give it up in the last few months, I really can't wait to get back into a cinema now. Actually, I would really like to see a film with an audience again, really.
Yeah, it's the audience that I'm missing, either with the size of the screen, maybe, or maybe it's the content. I don't know what it is. These people in my living room, I don't want them in there anymore. I want them to go. Please, I want to go into their world. Do you watch, I mean that's the Queen and the King's Gambit, the Queen's Gambit and the Crown, but do you watch telly?
A bit. What have I seen on TV this year? I think the thing that bowled me over, like a lot of people, was I May Destroy You, the Michaela Cole series. I don't think I've seen anything else that's matched up with that, really. It was extraordinary, and it was so nice to see a piece of TV that wasn't a genre piece and wasn't a cop show and wasn't a doctor show and those kind of things. Plus, it mixed humour and seriousness in a way which I love, but which is not done that often on British TV, I guess, these days, because people get a bit nervous when things can't be pigeonholed and compartmentalized and so on. I thought it was so much its own thing, and I really liked that about it.
What's the first film you ever saw? Do you remember?
I'm pretty sure it was Fantasia. I mean, we're talking ancient history now, because I'm 59, so it's more than half a century ago that I would have done these, and there are films which blur into each other, film-going experiences which blur into each other. But I have a vivid memory of seeing Fantasia during half-term at one afternoon, being absolutely terrified by it, as most kids were by those early Disney cartoons, I think. The sort of the darkness and the weirdness of it. I mean, it's like a kind of trip, that film, when you see it now.
Absolutely.
But it may have been Thunderbirds I'll Go, the Thunderbirds film, because I also have a strong memory of going to see that, and again being very scared by it. scared by the puppet versions of Cliff Richard and the Shadows, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, they're quite good as well. They get the dance just right, don't they? Yeah, so where would they have been, those cinemas?
Thunderbirds I'll Go was definitely in the centre of Birmingham, probably the Odeon New Street. Fantasia was at a very big cinema, very big, grand kind of Art Deco cinema, which was only a few miles from our house in the suburbs, but became a bingo hall very, very shortly after that, and is a gym now, I think.
Yes, that seems to be the path.
Yeah.
My first film with my parent was definitely a Snow White at the Hendon, what's it called, the Classic, and that was a bingo hall, and now is a gym as well. So there's obviously a progression from Disney to there.
Disney to bingo to gyms.
To working out. Well, is there a film that changed your life that you remember watching and went, that's me now?
Well, I'm sorry to come back to Billy Wilder, but it has to be The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, I think, which, having been reviled by critics and ignored by audiences in 1970 on its release, started to crop up on British TV in the mid-70s. I must have been 14 or 15 when I first saw it, because I was a Sherlock Holmes fan. I'd never heard of Billy Wilder, and I just loved it. I thought it was so elegant and so witty and so sad. And this music, this achingly melancholy music that underpinned everything, and which, of course, had inspired him to make the film in the first place, because the whole film was kicked off by Miklos Rocha's violin concerto. That immediately made me want to see every film that Billy Wilder had made, so it started that obsession. And it also made me think subconsciously, I want to write something like that myself, and that sadness and humor are not incompatible, and in fact are kind of natural bedfellows.
Yeah.
So it had a very profound effect.
Yeah, didn't it? I'm slightly surprised by that. Not because you know where we are now in particular. It makes complete sense. But I would have thought I would have had you down for watching a Roma film and falling in love with French women and wine and going off and and studying French and all of that sort of thing. I thought I would have had you down for one of those.
Not really. I mean, we did have back in the 70s on BBC Two and so on. We had great seasons of Truffaut and Roma and Buñuel and stuff like this. The first French film that I fell in love with, which would have been at the end of the 70s, was Les Parapluies de Cherbourg, because I've always liked Michel Legrand's music, and again the color palette of that film, the audacity of having the whole thing sung, and this terrible wistfulness and sense of lost opportunity and love that didn't work out and so on really struck a chord with me in the late 70s. It was on at my school film society, which up to that point had been run by the boys at my all boys school in Birmingham. And we had a very strict rule, which was that the film had to have a nude scene in it. So because this was the only chance we got really to see for this kind of titillation. So the music lovers was on constant rotation, and
you could always rely on the French. For that.
Don't Look Now, of course, which is an absolute masterpiece and one of my 3 or 4 favorite films. But we only got it for the sex scene between Tom Sutherland and Julie Christie. And then everybody was very, very. A new schoolmaster came along and he took over the film society. One of the first films he booked was Les Parapluies de Cherbourg. And everyone was nudging each other and saying, "Oh, it's a French film. It's going to be Catherine Deneuve. There's going to be lots of nudity and so on." And they were absolutely outraged that they had to sit through this 90 minutes of singing and French melancholy. And I absolutely adored it. I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen. So
yeah, it is. I mean, it's not even camp. It's not even like in the camp musical. It's not even the Demoiselle de Rochefort, which has got that kind of jazz hands element to it, which I love.
I love that as well, though. I mean, that's a really life affirming film. Actually, maybe I should write a novel about Jacques Demy, because the second half of his career was went pretty much off the rails, really.
There's the Hollywood bit where he went off and worked there, but then Agnes Varda's sort of beaten you to it by making sort of films about him.
Well, that's true. Yes, that's true.
And she's quite good. Don't take her on, Jonathan.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, choose your competition carefully.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she's only small, or was only small, but mighty, I have to say. Is there a film that you said you fell in love with, the French film? Is there a film you fell in love to, a romantic Jonathan Coe?
Yeah, I suppose actually the first film my wife and I went and saw together was in 1987. It was at the Curzon Cinema on the King's Road, and it was Bill Forsyth's adaptation of Housekeeping, the Marilyn Robinson novel. And I love Bill Forsyth. I think it's an absolute tragedy that he hasn't made a film in 21 years, however long it is now, because I think that run he had in the 1980s with Gregor's Girl, Local Hero, Comfort and Joy was just magnificent.
Beautiful.
And then Housekeeping is a much more serious, much more disturbing film in some ways, and I think a lot of people were very baffled by it, as I quite was at the time. I mean, maybe it has a romantic glow around it in my memory because it was the first film we saw on our date, but also it's just a beautiful film, and if you're gonna go on a first date and see a film, it might as well be a kind of near masterpiece. That gets the relationship off to a good start, I think.
Yeah, then you come out all aglow, and it obviously worked.
Exactly.
It obviously worked. And we thank Bill Forsyth for that one. Do you know what? I have not seen Housekeeping. I've seen the other 3 that you mentioned there, and that trilogy, and the trilogy he did before those as well, but not Housekeeping for some reason.
Yeah,
so I must go and.
Oh, you should definitely see it. It's much easier to see now. I mean, it was one of those films that disappeared into some kind of rights limbo for a couple of decades, I think. And I was asked to program a little film festival down in Bridport in Dorset about 10 years ago, and asked if I could screen it and if we could invite him down for a Q&As, which we did. To my amazement, he came because I'd heard he was very reclusive and so on, but he was so pleased that someone wanted to show this film that he came down like a shot. And I think the organisers told me it was the only print in the UK at the time, and you couldn't get it on DVD or anything. But I think there's a Criterion or some on Blu-ray now, and it's really worth seeing. He says it's his best film.
Well, I'm sure he was delighted to come down to talk about it as well. There's something marvellous about that filmmaking of another era. We tend to think films is evergreen in some way, but they do date, and I think that's exactly the what we get from the wistfulness behind Mr. Wilder and Me, which I think is a wonderful read and a wonderful watch at the same time. And Jonathan, it's been a real pleasure catching up with you. Really nice to see you. And
yes, thank you, Jason. Well. It's been really nice talking to you, and I'm glad you liked the book, and I'm glad it made you watch Fedora.
Yeah,
because basically you wouldn't have watched it otherwise, would you?
I don't think so. No, I really don't think so. So any other, if you want to do one around housekeeping that's going to force me to do next, then we can do it.
I would quite happily just write books about, flawed films by great forgotten film directors from now on. So, yeah.
I think there's a rich vein in there, so don't take on Jacques Demy.
Matthew Sweet or someone told me I should do Carry On Columbus next, but that's a step too far. A step too far.
He would, wouldn't he? Yes, it is. Columbus would be amazing because that's for him to do. I don't know what he's the perfect writer for that. There's a great joke he tells about that. I think it's about the sharks when there's the pirates jump off the ship, and there's one joke in Carry On Columbus, and I think it's Julian Clary, and the sharks come and the woman sort of says, "Oh, will they eat me whole?" And he says, "Madam, I believe they spit that bit out."
Yes.
Yeah. You see. So there you go.
Okay. Maybe I'll have another think about that.
Oh, yes, bear that one in mind. I'll go and do the Woody Allen ones as well if we're allowed. I can't do that anymore. No one wants those anymore. Lovely to see you. Thanks very much for joining me, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jason.
And Jonathan Coe's Mr. Wilder and Me is out now, published by Penguin, and for any film fan or book fan, it is the perfect Christmas present. And so many great recommendations in that interview, even if it's just basically watch all the Billy Wilder films, which are must-sees and would be a perfect sort of programme of things to watch this Christmas. What a treat, just like the book itself. Talking of classics, we watched a cracking little film noir called This Gun for Hire from 1942, starring Veronica Lake and Alan Ladd, the first time those two were paired together. It's remastered by Eureka Video, and it's on Blu-ray, and it's a hard diamond of the genre, adapted from a Graham Greene original novel set in London, and turned into a real LA thriller. I didn't know Veronica Lake, I must say, other than from Sullivan's Travels by Preston Sturgis, and in LA Confidential, Kim Bassinger's character is playing a prostitute that's a Veronica Lake lookalike, complete with the signature peekaboo platinum hairdo. But Veronica Lake's amazing in This Gun for Hire. She's a tiny thing. Secretly an FBI agent and a cop's mole. She's also a nightclub singer, and she does a couple of songs in this while doing magic tricks. That's her nightclub act. The second of which numbers sees her with a fishing rod, like a bondage whip, and in these thigh-length leather patent wading fishing boots that are just like, the most severe bondage gear. I mean, how they got away with it, I don't know, because she sings great.
Now you see it, now you don't, because hocus pocus, lo and behold, you get blinded by that moon of bright gold above. That's love.
She's very self-possessed as a femme fatale in this, finding her way through a ridiculous-to-describe plot of crippled industrialists and government agents and ruthless killers and vain men. The film is just perfect at balancing all of the elements, thoroughly enjoyable, comic at times even, and even though, like noirs should do, it takes a bleak view of human nature, it works. Ladd's killer, Raven, has this distinctive broken wrist that's on all the wanted posters, so half of America is looking for this guy with this kind of jutting out wrist. And I loved watching Veronica Lake. She's got these darting eyes, a sharp little nose, and this insouciant confidence in her own ability to survive and get through things, even with a gun pointing at her back. My next guest is known as a screen hard man. He's Craig Fairbrass, who starred in Prime Suspect, Cliffhanger and EastEnders before more recently being used in British gangster movies like The Rise of the Foot Soldier. However, new film Muscle finds him flexing his acting talents anew, playing a bodybuilding instructor who spots a weakling in Cavan Clerkin's moping call centre salesman, and he takes him under his bulging wing to make a man out of him.
What's the matter with you? No one's done a pull down like that since the 90s.
I'm sorry, no one showed me how to work it.
What's your game?
I said I'm sorry, I didn't know.
I ain't seen you there before, have I?
Just joined.
Well, welcome. Terry.
Hi, I'm Simon.
So what's the goal then?
Much. I really just want to get fit.
Fit? You want to get big and you want to get strong. And the way you're pulling that weight about, you'll end up a cripple. But don't worry, because I can prevent that from happening.
What, are you expensive?
Oh, please, the money should not be important. Look, I'm standing here now, and I'm looking at you, and I can see major potential. You just need a little bit of guidance, that's all.
I caught up with Craig Fairbrass and Cavan at the Biffa Awards last year, just as Muscle was making itself known, and over a few drinks, we had a good laugh. And I promised Craig that it was time for a proper interview with him about his acting, now that he was starring in a film that's got real depth and threat and complexity. So it was fantastic to meet up with him, and I began by asking Craig Fairbrass about the man he plays in Muscle, Terry.
Yeah, Terry is a very deep, complex, strange individual. Ex-military, obviously sexually very mixed up, but he's a very conniving, clever man. Very overpowering, domineering, which I sort of gravitated towards that because when I read it, I found him so exciting and so different and had so many little nuances there that I thought, if I'm lucky enough to play this part, I really think I could nail it.
Yeah.
I really think I could do it.
Because, I mean, obviously you've done overpowering and sort of, strong on screen before, but it must have been the flaws in this guy, the complexities that really appeal, because you can get those in. Those are not what we're used to seeing.
Yeah. Well, basically what drew me towards was the weaknesses, the Achilles heel, the insecurities, because really deep down he's a big insecure fellow who just roams gyms looking for his next victim.
Yeah.
And that is when I read, there's quite a few scenes that actually never made the film. But it was just exciting to play because it was different for me to do, to show weakness, to show vulnerability, but in a strange way.
There's something very compelling about how Cavan's character is attracted to him. We see him to start with. He's a salesman. He's preying on vulnerable people as well. And he gets preyed on so easily himself. He falls for his own tricks in a way.
He does. He really does. Yeah, it's exactly that. You're the first person to actually pick that up. But Cavan, what an actor. I mean, you're only as good as the man you're opposite. And he is a phenomenal actor. I mean, the guy won Best Actor at the Talent Film Festival. It's just a joy to go and work with. When you're working with someone who's that good, it obviously rubbed off on me. I think so, because we were both very happy with the scenes.
It seems to me that it's about masculinity. I felt that was the real message of this one, how to man up. There's a bit where you give him some steroids or some drugs. This is man juice, you say. Yeah. And that's really, I thought, God, we could all do with a bit of man juice. I mean, me personally, I don't know. You've got enough man juice, Craig, frankly.
They were all the little intricacies of the film about how we wanted to make it real. And some of those scenes are just magical. I look at it back, I'm so proud of the film.
I can see that. I'm really happy.
Very rarely I'm proud of anything I've done as an actor. It is a little gem, that movie.
Because, I mean, some of the other films that you have done, let's say the gangster films you've done, but, the kind of big ones that you've done that are, I suppose, like the Foot Soldier ones, the ones that they are about masculinity as well. That's why those films do sort of work. They might be on the surface a bit sort of like wallop, but they are about being a man in a man's world and holding your own in some way. There is a machismo, and that's Muscle just kind of muscles down on that one, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, it does.
Is it like that world? Has it been like that for you, the world? You know what I mean? Finding your way in it?
Yeah, I mean, growing up where I grew up, very much so. Yeah, 1,000%. From a kid, going to football with my mates and joining the gym. I worked on the door when I was younger. It was all of those things of, as I say, the areas. I remember I was a late developer and all of a sudden, I got a little bit bullied when I was a kid.
Right.
And then one morning I woke up, I was 6'3", and my dad said, right, get down the gym now, thicken yourself up. And it gave me confidence.
Yes.
Definitely gave me confidence. All of those situations, all of those experiences you have as a younger man, you take them forward as a man, and you use those. I've used those situations and experiences of in my acting.
And not many people have, to be honest, Craig. That's why I quite like watching you. I'm not saying that I don't like watching Eddie Redmayne and Benedict Cumberbatch, and acting is about pretending and all of this. But sometimes I do feel that we've lost the art of having actors who've lived a bit and have actually got a bit of experience that they're bringing to it and have a bit of life.
Yeah, I just think I've always, as an actor, tried to make things as real and as authentic as I possibly can, just to make it believable. Because I think if you watch something and you believe it and you're drawn in, because I watch actors all the time and I'm like, my God, he's good, because I believe it. It's as simple as that.
Who are the actors that you look at and you say, well, they're good. I like what they're doing.
I love Matthew McConaughey. I really like him as an actor. I like Mads Mikkelsen. Really like him. Great choice. Really like him.
They can do funny. They can do threatening. They can do.
But it's the intensity on screen. They've got that watchability.
What was the first film you ever saw, Craig Fairbrass?
Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston stuck in my mind as a kid. I remember the poster. Just the magic of that movie.
The ending of that movie.
Yeah, exactly.
What a blimey. Best end. I think it's the best ending ever, maybe.
Yeah. No,
I don't like to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, because I'm still waiting for my kids to see that and kind of go, see what they've done.
But it's a classic. And then growing up, and then watching more sort of heavy duty movies, I sort of fell in love with the Lee Marvins and the Kirk Douglases. I remember watching Point Blank for the first time ever. The films as a younger man that made me want to be an actor. Watching those type of actors, Lee Marvin, John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, Bronson, because they were men.
Yes. Lee Marvin had lived a life as well, before.
Yeah.
Point Blank is fantastic. Yeah. He just keeps walking through that movie. Great choice.
Yeah, great film.
Yeah. What are you watching at the moment? Have you seen anything good lately?
Box sets I dip in and out. I'm very fussy with him. I like the foreign stuff.
Oh.
Just finished about a month ago that Founder. I don't know if you've seen it.
I haven't. Do you know what? People they recommended me this one. It's been a while since people's recommended it, and everyone. Do you know what? I must get back to that, because people keep saying how good it is. Good people say that.
Yeah. No, it's excellent. Before that,
this is Israeli Mossad spy thing.
Yeah. But seriously well done. I mean, it's so watchable. It's gripping. I watched Dark Waters recently. I don't know if you've seen that, the Mark Ruffalo film.
Oh yes, I have seen that. Yeah, a good, a very sort of low boiling simmer of a film. Do you know what I mean?
Good. And before that, I watched The King, and it sort of made me feel that every now and again they do make a good film, because there's so much shit on. Like we all know, it takes us half out to pick something.
This is it. You have that trouble as well. Good. I'm glad that we all do.
But it's just hard to find quality films. But
the King, is that the Timothy Chalamet one when he's the
have you seen it?
Yes, the Shakespearean one. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of great cinematography on that is fantastic. I think. Yeah,
unbelievable.
He's a good, interesting director. That is it Justin Kurtzman that did that?
Yeah. Mark,
Who did the King?
Is it Mark Shod? CHOD?
Am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, he did Animal Kingdom.
Oh yeah, Michaud, David Michaud, that's the one. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. The Animal Kingdom's a terrific film as well.
Yeah,
I mean, some of those Australian actors, like Ben Mendelsohn, he's got.
I love him. Yeah, he's great.
He's got that intensity.
Before I watched the Outsider, what was on? That was pretty good. Did you see the series with him?
No, has he got a series?
You should check that out.
The Outsider,
really good.
Good, interesting shout as well. Yeah, those Australian directors, Michaud and Justin Kurtzel, they do those.
And Animal House, the TV series, the American adaptation. I mean, it's not as good as a film, but very watchable.
Very powerful.
Because you run out, don't you? They end and you go, what's next?
And you're bereft of these things. Yeah. Do you watch things as a family? How old are your kids, did you say now?
Oh, my kids are 32 and 30.
Oh, so, right.
It's like, but they're around all the time. We've got the big screen and it's nice to sit down as a family. I mean, we all grew up watching movies. My youngest son, Luke, produced 2 films that we did, London Heist and Breakdown.
Right. So he's in the game now, is he?
He's not. He's now in. He's verged into another business now, outside of film, and it's too hard. The film going. He was like, I got to get out of this.
It is. It's a big stress producing a movie, especially if your dad's in it.
And for me, as a producer on those films, you're sitting there, you're doing a scene where you've got to get emotionally charged, and you're looking at your watch at the left eye because you've got to be out of a location in 20 minutes. it's not something that I would want to do again.
No, and you don't want that as an actor to rushing it through because we've got times going and you've got to get this one right. You need to summon it up. But it sort of fascinates me that that you have to spend so long trying to pick a movie. I mean, that you want to watch with your wife and things like that. Are there ones that you compromise on? I don't know what she likes. I mean, she's obviously used to you right now and the sort of movies that you're going to be doing and liking. Are there ones that you kind of go, all right, we'll watch that because you want to watch that?
No, it's only what I want to watch. No, I'm joking. I mean, her taste is we got very similar taste. There's certain films I was just about to switch off the other night and The Godfather's back on. I must have seen it 100 times, but it's them quality movies that you dip into and you go, I've got to watch it through.
Yeah, I know. Once it started, Goodfellas for me, because it's always on. Sometimes you're flicking it wherever I join it. If it's at the beginning or halfway through, I've got to watch it to the end.
You have to. Yeah. Once Upon a Time in America. I mean, that's 3 hours, but I mean, my favourite film of all time. But,
is that your favourite? So if there was a classic film that you can go back in time, it would take you back to 1920 or something and say, right, you're starting your career now. Is there a classic film that you wish you could have been in? Or that I could have done that, I would have been great in that?
Yeah, there was always a role. I mean, growing up for the last 10 years, I would love to have played Bill Sykes in a really heavy-duty version of Oliver. That type of stuff I would love to have done.
A non-musical version of Oliver.
Yeah, but like a really dark version. Yeah. I would love to have done that because it's such a great role.
Yeah.
But I was lucky enough to meet James Caan a few years back. I did a little film with him in Louisiana, and I couldn't wait to meet him. Purely just to talk about The Godfather and John Wayne. And
was he all right about that? He's not like, oh, no.
Oh, God, shut him up. Yeah. No, he was lovely. But it was just so weird to sit there. This is the man who's looked into the eyes of Marlon Brando and John Wayne. I just... but going back to those films, to be in one of them movies, to be in one of them big magical films that no one really knew at the time what they would become, these iconic films.
Like a 70s one, like you mentioned, like the 60s Point Blank ones, or you see yourself in a biblical epic sort of, graveyed up, fighting Kirk Douglas in it.
No, I don't. Funny enough, but I do like the really good. Someone just sent me a really good script to sort of another sort of take on Get Carter. Really good. But now I'm always looking for that emotional. I'm always looking for the side of the vulnerability, the weakness, something that makes the character interesting, not just this geezer who can just beat everyone up. There's got to be something in there that separates that.
Well, I think you've earned it now. I think the last couple, and certainly with Muscle, there's definitely you have a right. You have a right to seek out.
Can't get me an agent, can you?
I'd love to. I'd love to be I think I'd probably be quite a good agent. I couldn't do it for myself, but I think I probably could do it quite well. Exactly. But it's about you reading the script and sort of seeing it. Go, well, where do I come in here? What's it for me? And working with interesting directors as well, because they'll find something in it for you as well. It might not be there on the page.
But it's finding the quality material.
Is it difficult out there?
It's not easy. I'm telling you, get sent stuff and you look at it and you go, I've read this 1,000 times, but if you, every now and again, you do get something that comes through and it is quality. You can tell straight away when you start reading it.
What about a nice big telly series that takes 8 seasons that you'll be in there?
Well, no, funny enough, you're saying that. We're just about to go forward with it now. We've had a little bite. This is something that I developed when in lockdown. I was in a play last year that got nominated for an Olivier about PTSD, and a writer came and see me in the play and he said, Craig, listen, I'm a fan of what you do. I'd love to, write something for you. He said, what's your favourite TV series? What do you like if you could do it? I said, well, I was obsessed with The Shield and I loved Bracco and I love all those corrupt cop series, Line of Duty, that type of stuff. But the guy's good at heart, the Ray Donovans, the Tony Soprano. If you can get that character with the backdrop of the police and doing something, and we worked it all through all summer together because I've written a couple of scripts and it's ready, and we're now pursuing to get the pilot made.
Well, like a British one though.
It's a British, it's called Second Skin. It's about it's really good.
Ooh, we haven't had Line of Duty. You mentioned is always a good one, but I always think back to the Sweeney or something like that. Those kind of tough cop movies, that tough cop series that we had. We don't seem to have quite those anymore.
We don't, I'm afraid. And that touches on that. It's very sort of now, it's all about London, the diversity of London, the crime that's going on and what we're having to deal with on a daily basis.
Did you see the gangs of London?
Yeah, I didn't really take to it for me. It was a little bit too, I don't know. There was something in there that I didn't gravitate towards.
You weren't in it?
Not so much that. It was just because I love Joe Cole. I think he's phenomenal.
Yeah, he's good, isn't he?
Yeah, really good.
Did you see that Thai boxing movie that he did?
I did. Prayer Before Dawn.
Yeah,
I loved it.
Yeah, he was tremendous in that, wasn't he?
Incredible.
What an incredible film.
Blinders.
Yes.
Yeah. Great actor.
Well, look, Craig, it's been fantastic talking to you, and it honestly it was a real joy watching Muscle. I was repelled, I was attracted, I was like, oh my god! Halfway through, there's like
the orgy.
The orgy. Let's call it the orgy. Yeah. This is the biggest sex scene I think I've seen on British TV ever. I mean, not TV, but British film.
I did the article last week in the Guardian. I said, well, it took me 3 days to get over. That was the tagline.
Yeah.
But as Gerard said, it was weird going because we shot over 2 days, 2 different parties.
Shot over everything by the look of it, from what I saw.
And he said he was like, going in the next day, it was all a bit sticky. Oh, there was a strange smell in there that wasn't nice. But it is it pulls no punches, put it that way.
Oh, I tell you, I was quite impressed with it. I have to say, just in the way that he's finished it with the edit as well. I mean, shooting it must be difficult, but the edit making it look so throbbing and kind of difficult, like a Gaspar Noé film. It had that kind of, it could have been a sort of Pornhub thing. It could have looked awful, but it didn't.
Yeah, but Gerard is so stylish. He's a genius. I'm sorry, the guy's a genius. When he makes stuff, because he's very fussy in what he does, but when he's so film literate, it's incredible.
What was he talking to you? Just to some of the film references? I don't know if you sat and watched films with him that were all.
No,
TV
but
shows.
there was elements of The Servant in this. Fight Club. That the dynamic between me and Kevin, our relationship.
Yes. Of course. I didn't think of that. Absolutely, Ed Norton and Brad Pitt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one's which? Who are you?
I'll have to be Brad.
Of course.
Yeah, and it's a very integral part of the film, because the way Terry literally takes over Simon's life to the point of destroys him, basically, as the tagline says, build him up, tear him apart. It really is it's a dark, beautiful piece.
But testament to both of the performances, because you're like, well, don't do that. I'm saying to Karen, don't let him in your house. Don't let him bring these girls in. That's. But there's something in him. So, well, I do. He preyed on those weaknesses, and you could see why he did it. Each time I'm telling him, don't do it. But each time you're thinking, oh, he's going to be all right.
It's so funny because when we opened up at the London Film Festival, we had a full house, and you could hear that. No. Under the breath, people literally. It was brilliant, watching it with an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what we're missing at the moment. We might be able to get back to that. You have the opening on, tomorrow the cinemas are opening and your film comes out. So hopefully some socially distanced cinemas can watch it. No one's going to get too close to anyone after watching your film, I think. They'll need to sort of maintain a little bit of a distance on it. There's one thing I didn't realise is that the score, which I think was brilliant, kept throbbing all the way through. I did notice I knew at the end, I was by the.
Yeah,
and
Gerard's brother.
Is Gerard's brother, is Matt Johnson from The. Yeah. And this is his first film score, I think.
And the music, for me, I remember going to we was looking at some bits and pieces, and I was like, the music just blew me away because it's so atmospheric, it's so moving. It's the cream on the cake for that film. I mean, any other score would have been, there's something very haunting about it. It's just such a beautiful partnership.
Yeah, no, it is, and it really works. It pushes it forward. It's very powerful, and the use of the songs is good. There's Manfred Mann in there, and it was like, sounds fresh. You hadn't heard it before. And worked really, really well.
I'm so glad you liked it though, because I know you're very fussy.
I am a bit fussy actually as well, and there were bits when there was moments where I thought, well, what is? As soon as it started, I was like, oh, this isn't not. I'm not really know what to expect here.
Right, that's good.
And it was for a British film and that low budget, it's very unusual, and I haven't seen one like it before. And as I say, very atmospheric and really well done, all of you. So lovely to chat with you, Craig. Really nice to do this
Jason.
properly, not round a bar. But do you know what? I do wish we could get into a bar and do it again pretty soon.
We will.
All right, then.
We will.
You're on.
Have a lovely Christmas. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, you too, mate. Nice to speak to you.
Cheers, mate.
And Muscle, starring Craig Fairbrass, directed by Gerard Johnson, and with Cavan Clerkin in it as well, who's excellent. It's out in cinemas now and on streaming platforms from December the 4th. All of which brings us closer to the end of this edition of Seen Anything Good Lately. Just time to tell you about Maradona, of course, Diego, who's just died. Of course, I had to watch Asif Kapadia's documentary Maradona all over again. I think it's the third or fourth time I've seen it. And it just, in the shadow of Maradona's death, because of course when I spoke to Asif about it originally, Amy and Senna, he'd done before, they were about dead people. And he said the difference was that Maradona was still alive and he could interview him, which he did in Dubai, and he had his voiceover throughout of that interview was sort of sewn throughout the film, but it was different because Maradona was alive. Well, Asif, you've done it again. You've killed off another one. And seeing it now as Maradona, it was amazing anyway that Maradona was alive. You see that movie anyway, the amount of cocaine he took and then played football, just that lifestyle. So having him as a ghostly presence, I think adds another layer of complexity to Maradona. And everyone sort of said, oh, it's not as good as Senna, it's not as good as Amy. My belief, because I love football, is that it's better than both of those films. I think Maradona is the masterwork, and that's the one that should be winning awards and Oscars. It's the one that's certainly most popular and the one that seems to have nailed a certain flaw of human frailty in our icon and in our heroes. I love Maradona, definitely worth watching again.
Diego, dici una cosa tua adesso. Penso che hai intervistato tutte, no? Dai! Quando sei venuto a Napoli credevi veramente di andare a vincere il titolo?
Sì, io che mi sono andato da Barcellona senza vincere niente praticamente perché abbiamo vinto una Coppa del Re, sì. Però sì, avevo...
Guarda, ma hanno frascicato...
And I very much enjoyed the Jazz 625 special on the British jazz explosion that was on BBC 4 and is now playing on the BBC iPlayer. And it charts the current rise in jazz artists coming out of London and the UK, taking over the world with their beats. It was just really neatly put together, very professionally presented by Moses Boyd. And it reminded me of going to gigs, listening to these guys, which I've been doing, listening and dancing and singing along. And I'm really missing that at the moment, aren't we all? So it was really good to see people like Courtney Pine talking about the explosion that he spearheaded back in the 80s, and now it's coming again. And then there's these guys like Moses Boyd and Nubia Garcia and Shabaka Hutchings, the Ezra Collective, and Kokoroko, who are one of my favourites. And, things are really happening here on that jazz scene, and they're going to be noted forever. So it was good to see an episode of this classic BBC jazz programme, Jazz 625, dedicated to them and their music. It's really good, an hour and a half of great introduction to what's going on that British jazz scene. Find it on iPlayer. And why don't we go out with Kokoroko and the appropriately named Carry Me Home. See you next time.